Hello everybody and welcome back. I'm doing something a little different this time. I'm doing not really a review so much as a discussion on an episode of Edd N Eddy. Now this was a cartoon that I grew up with in my later years of childhood and teenager years, and a show I really loved for that era. And recently, I've been going back every now and then trying to find the, old episodes and watch them and such like that. And while I was researching on that lost episode deal on Creepypasta, I found out about the original intended ending for the episode for the series, which is the last episode in season 4. Take this, Ed, and shove it. Now, at first I was confused about the lost episode and this episode, but what I came to find out is that, as I said, this is the original intended ending. This was before Popular Man brought it back for more season in a movie. So as I go through this, keep in mind that this was supposed to be the very end of Edd N Eddy. So, let me just go through a quick synopsis of what happens in the episode. At the very beginning, as it is with many of the episodes, and with the theme and everything in the show, it's very light and happy. Eddie's newest scam is kind of like a kid, like a kind of mix between a circus and the little kid's TV show. He's all really happy. He has a balloon animal. He brings out Double D, which is Mr. Calculator Pants, and on him he has 1 + 1 = fun. Ed drives a train through, and it's very all childish and very light and very happy. But what happens is the kids are growing up, so they don't buy into it. They think it's childish. So this leads to the Ed's running around, and Double D is showing them how all the kids are growing up. This leads to careers. This leads to Eddie doing a career counseling for money. This actually works, and Eddie and the Eds get jawbreakers, but it works too well. As things usually do in the episode, they run into mishaps. They lose the jawbreakers to Naz because she's a dentist, and she says they rot them their teeth. So they get through that, and they run into a couple other kids, but they finally get the jawbreakers back to Eddie's garage, where they intend to bust open the desk that Naz hit him in, because Naz hit him in the desk. And as they're doing this, Eddie gets knocked on the head by a whole bunch of stuff, and he awakens in his room, and he's like, "Oh, my aching back." And obviously, and the shadow looks weird. You can tell he's old. You can tell by his voice that he's old. And he looks in the mirror, and he sees an old man standing there, which is, of course, him. So he's like, "Hey, Grandpa." And he stops and realizes that it's him. So he starts flipping out, because to him, in his mind, he's gone from a child, a happy-go-lucky, happy child, to an old man, old. And so old, in fact, that when he opens the door to go find out what's going on, Ed and Double D are there. And he says something about he wants to see what happened to us. We were kids. And Double D's like, "Well, Eddie, we haven't been kids in over 90 years. So you got to think about that. You can put, whatever you think age-wise constitutes a child or a kid, but think of it in over 90 years, you got to reckon there'll be maybe 100, over 100. So they're old as hell. So Eddie starts running throughout the neighborhood, and one of the running themes in this one is he keeps having a cane in his hands. And he's throwing it away when he sees it, but he runs into all the neighborhood kids, and they're all old, you know. And he goes back home to try and get the jawbreaker, because he has the idea the jawbreakers are key to youth, you know. We'll eat the jawbreakers and everything will be fine. So Ed busts open the desk, and they all turn to dust. So Eddie's freaking out. He grabs his cane, starts hitting himself in the face. I'm not old, I'm not old, I'm not old. And it fakes you out. It's like, oh, you know, he had been knocked, his head got knocked out, he got knocked out, and it flashes, he goes back to where he's a kid. And he's in his, he's lying down on the ground and like a cot or whatever, and he's, you know, I'm not old, I'm not old. Of course, he's a kid, so he doesn't have a cane, so he just doing it with his hands. So he's like, you know, he's so happy. He's like, I'm a kid again. Double D, is that you? Happy, 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 happy. So very happy. And there's this double fake out. A fucking double fake out. And it ends on the fact that he's old. And it ends with them laughing. But at the end, very end, Eddie's like, I still wish I was a kid. Now let's back up. Now that I've done the synopsis of this. And let's think about how honestly, really dark and disturbing this is. First of all, this means, because Double D says that he was re-electing, he was like recalling one of their old stories from their childhood. And Eddie says they were all stories. So with that, I think you probably can if you want to, and maybe some people take your side. But what that says to me is it wasn't just that one episode and that one adventure that was a memory. Everything we fucking seen is just a dead memory of Eddie, who's old, mostly depressed, you know, over 100 probably, near death, and only he can do is play cribbage with his old friends. That's really fucking disturbing. And it would have, I won't say it would have worked in another show that had a lot of darker themes. I think that it would either have worked well, or it had been one of those, you know, they're just playing the, you know, it was all a dream card. And that usually sucks. But in this one, I think it's really quite disturbing. It's really quite dark and somewhat depressing, actually. Because the rest of the show is really light. It has very light colors. Most of the time, the characters have big smiles on their face. They're always in a really good mood. Sure, they'll have their down times. They'll get angry. They'll get upset. But for the most part, they're really happy. They're running around. And the music's really jazzy and upbeat. Again, the colors are bright. Even at night. Even when the episode goes into night, or the episode happens at night, colors are still very bright. So, let's break down some of these scenes, mostly when they're old. Eddie runs first, when he runs out of the house, because he's old, he runs into Johnny and Plank. And Plank has a lot of stuff smeared, like some of his mouth is smeared, his eye is smeared. So that's their way of getting him old. It's really clever, in a way. It actually really is really clever. But it just shows just how decrepit he's become. And Johnny and Plank are playing chess, and Eddie destroys the chessboard. But Johnny's like, you know, checkmate. And then a few minutes later, he moves again. And he's forgetful. He can't forget that 5 seconds ago he had finished the game. So, they see Naz, and she's feeding birds. And Eddie sees her. He can't believe how old she's gotten. He's no longer attracted to her, even though Johnny is. And so he runs off. He runs into Jimmy and Sarah, which they're not that bad. They're still pretty happy. But then he runs into Rolf. And this scene is funny yet disturbing, because Rolf is senile as shit. He calls Eddie Kevin, and he calls him different names throughout that scene. But he's going to have this long white beard. He's hunched over, and he's yelling about, you know, he keeps calling him Eddie different names. He says his tractor's not for sale, even though his tractor has a big sign on it that's for sale. He says he's going to go get his beating stick. It's just very clear that Rolf has lost his mind in his old age. The next person he runs into is Kevin. Make sure I'm not forgetting anybody here. We've got Johnny, we've got Sarah, we've got Jimmy, we've got Rolf, and we got Kevin, and we got Naz. And that's pretty much it, except for the Canker Sisters, which don't make an appearance here. They did in one of the deleted scenes, but don't make an appearance in the actual episode. Runs to Kevin. Kevin's on a motor scooter, like, kind of runs into Eddie a little bit, and, you know, battle on you, dork. And again, it's funny, but it's kind of disturbing that even Kevin has been reduced to a motor scooter. Not as bad as Rolf. But that's when Eddie, he sees the Jawbreakers, and he's like, you know, they're the key to our youth. So, this one's a double fake out happens. And like I said, it's such a contrast to the rest of the series. I mean, the series really does have a lot of morals hidden in it that you have to look for. And I think if I had seen this as a kid, I really wouldn't have gotten how disturbing it was. So, I mean, it's not something that's like a bad episode, like kids will want to see and being like, you know, well, that's messed up. They're like, he's old, look at him, he's old. They won't get it. Maybe a few will, but most of them won't get it. But it's so messed up. And a lot of people believe, and I understand, and I actually agree with this, is the cane thing, where Eddie, it's like 3 or 4 times throughout the episode, he throws the cane away. And it's like you can't escape old age. It's such a constant reminder that he's old. And one of the things that I noticed that I haven't seen any of the discussions, and there's not really a lot about this, which is kind of surprising. Eddie has to constantly forget that he's old. And that the stories, and what we see before, are all stories and memories. Because, think about it, the way he freaks out, and the way he's running around, he doesn't realize he's old. And the way that Double D tells him, you know, we have been kids in 90 years, you were recalling another story from our childhood. This means, I see it as this having meant, unless this was the first time, and I highly doubt it, that this has happened many times, probably at least once for each episode, or maybe even twice for a lot of episodes if you count, as most episodes aren't one whole story through, they're 2 different stories. But you could argue that, you know, that was just one solid recollection of Eddie, because, like I said, they said all the stories they were all stories, is what Eddie says at the end. So what that means to me is, like I said, each story, each episode, and I'm just gonna go with that, is a recollection where the same thing probably happens. You know, Eddie's old, he's telling stories, he doesn't want to be old. Because one of the things they go throughout the episode, when it's really light and happy at first, which is the one thing, it goes from really light and happy, even probably more so than it usually is, to just, boom. They're old, it's really dark. It's such a sudden change, it's a total flip around. But let me get back to my point. Throughout a lot of the beginning, Eddie's like, I'm never going to grow old. I'm always going to be a kid. And it just shows you that growing old and getting old is inevitable. Of course, unless you die before that, you're going to get old. You know, you're going to have the problems that come with being old. You know, a lot of your different senses are going to give. Your brain may deteriorate. And just to see these really happy characters, for the most part they are happy, but Eddie's the one that really gets down. And to see them so old, so decrepit and so vulnerable is really shocking. Even having known what the episode was about beforehand and researching through the Lost episode, it was still a kick to the face. And I don't know. Like I said, if it had been another cartoon that had a lot of darker themes, this would have, it would have fit more. I don't want to go into whether it would have worked or not, but I'm trying to think of a really good example. It would kind of be like running out throughout your life, really happy, really happy-go-lucky, it's always sunshiny for the most part. And then you realize all your whole life was just a big lie, and you're gloomy and depressed, and wow. So that's what I want to talk about right there for a minute. Again, like I said in my last review for Bates Motel, I'm doing Bates Motel and Fargo next week. Can't wait for Fargo. But I wanted to get the Edd N Eddy thing over with, and I wanted to talk about it. And another thing I'm going to talk about with the series, and this is a much lighter note, is how neglectful the parents are. And I'll get into that when I get in that review. But until next time, peace out and enjoy your youth while you can.